Murdered Soul Suspect is a 2014 action-adventure slash supernatural police procedural slash dead cop simulator developed by Airtight games of Dark Void and Quantum Conundrum fame. Murdered Soul Suspect, henceforth known as Soul Suspect because I can't pronounce the word murdered for the life of me, polarized critics when it came out almost a decade ago, and I never really understood why critics were so riled up against it, considering 2014 had its fair share of duds that deserve way more vitriol than Soul Suspect got. It's got an interesting premise, a dead cop investigating his own murder to reach the afterlife. It's quite short, it looked okay in videos, gamers seem to like it. Why was this game received so badly again? What's worse, the scores put me off this game for years because I was operating under the assumption that it was glorified shovelware, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Until one fateful early October evening when I got home from work ready to purchase it on Steam at full price, only to realize that I had already bought it in 2019 for like €2 and I forgot I owned it. Let's say my buddy Paul's stream convinced me to try it out. Oh yeah, and I also needed a spooky game for Halloween, so there's that. Anyways, I fired it up, beat it in like 3 days, and yeah, it's probably one of the most aggressively okay games I've ever played. It's nothing special, it does exactly what it says on the tin and doesn't overstay its welcome. So today, to mark this very special spooky holiday that I've somehow never celebrated on this channel, let's take a look at Soul Suspect, this relic of early 2010s AA gaming. But before we dive in, I have a Twitter where I tweet tweets and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real life money. This is the Summer of Mark's Spooktober! I don't actually have a title card for this, so transition.
Joy.
Seriously?
And Ronin is better? Wouldn't your parents think you'd be a medieval gladiator?
The game takes place in early 2010 Salem, Massachusetts. Arguably the worst time to be living in that place, because alongside the literal tapestry of supernatural phenomena affecting that city across pop culture, residents had to also deal with 9gag's ghoulish grip on internet meme culture. Anyways, in Soul Suspect's version of Salem, a serial killer known as the Bell Killer, dope Blue Oyster Cult side project name by the way, begins killing people with no obvious MO. Detective Ronan Yellowwolf circa 2012 O'Connor tracks down the Bell Killer to an apartment complex. Unfortunately, Ronan gets till it's gunned out of a window and shot, execution style. He returns in the form of a ghost and learns that in order to reach the afterlife and meet his dead wife Julia, he must solve his own murder. He learns all of this from his dead wife, by the way, not even a how have you been or you fucking bum, I've been dead for 5 minutes and you're already smoking cigarettes in the living room. Nah. Straight to business. And that's everything you need to know at the moment. I'll circle back to the story later in the video because I actually think the plot is one of Soul Suspect's strongest aspects. Until then, let's talk a bit about Salem and its spoopy phenomena. So Salem holds an interesting spot in pop culture, with many movies, TV shows, books, horror or otherwise, set in this seemingly inconspicuous seaside hamlet. I haven't engaged with like 90% of that Salem-centric media, but I have read a couple of paragraphs about the Salem witch trials on Wikipedia and have seen the first season of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix starring Kiernan Shipka of Mad Men fame, so you could say I'm something of a Salem scholar. Anyways, like I said, Soul Suspect is set in Salem, and it's super clear that the devs had a lot of love for this setting. It's not the most vibrant of interactive worlds, but it does have a strong sense of place and it's brimming with atmosphere. Thanks to the ghost theme, the devs were able to visually juxtapose the old creepy colonial Salem with the equally creepy modern Salem. Like, you'll walk through some back alley and stumble into a creaky colonial ship, pass through a burning house whose blaze had been long extinguished, or see the ghostly apparitions of revolutionary cannons smack dab in the middle of a piazza. It's a great way to deliver story and lore visually, as confusing as it might make navigation at times. Of course, you could just read the dozens of plaques littered throughout the city whose existence the game justifies by making Salem an in-universe tourist hotspot like a nerd, but what's the fun in that, right? Why would anyone waste time reading when there's so much cool shit to see in Salem? Like the literally hundreds of ghosts appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye. See, I'm not what you would call a horror guy, so the first time I saw this happening I almost shat and pissed my pants. But once the luster had passed and got replaced by an uncanny sense of familiarity, I started growing fond of these ectoplasm-filled fuckers. A sense of camaraderie started forming between me and these poor souls, who, it's fair to assume, probably died for stealing a handful of beans or from diarrhea. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, world design. Yeah, they add a lot to the setting, environmental storytelling, yada yada. Now, by far my favorite small detail in Sole Suspect concerns Ronan's ghostly ability to walk through walls. This alone has the potential of opening up a Pandora's box of game design headaches. After all, there's a reason why the expression clipping through the environment exists. So, what did the devs do? Simple, Ronan can walk only through specific walls. The walls that he can't walk through had been consecrated back in the colonial era when people still believed in ghosts. Coincidentally, it seems like they picked up game design as a hobby because they made extra sure to consecrate the other walls separating indoor areas from the outside, and the walls serving as choke points during the game's combat set pieces. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And that's pretty much it. I wouldn't say Sole Suspects excels in the world building department, but it does have some interesting concepts, such as the ghostly apparitions of the town's past and ghosts flicking in and out of existence. Sadly, that's not quite enough to carry the world building, and I would lie if I said I didn't want more. Like, what if the game let you switch between timelines in certain areas? Say you're in a room and notice a piece of furniture that seems anachronistic, you press a button and voila, you're in that room's 17th century version. With things as they are, I always felt like the game was blueballing me, which I guess is thematically consistent with the game's blue filter.
Now, my boy quarterbacked for the Witches all 4 years at Salem High. Was on the varsity when he was a freshman.
Well, congratulations on the wedding and the football.
But this guy would have loved to see my boy play football. It's not my fault. My kid's great.
Not even listening.
Sole Suspect's character development and writing is kind of a mixed bag. Let's start with the positives. I liked how they handled Ronan, the main character. If he seems like a walking cliché, that's because he actually is. But in a good way. Sole Suspect's Ronan is one of those rare examples of cliches done right. So, for a bit of backstory, Ronan was basically a violent hoodlum that spent his youth Mark Wahlberging on the streets of Salem, stealing, thieving, robbing, brawling, and building a rap sheet so extensive it would make Tony Sirico blush. Like any hoodlum worth their salt, he marked each arrest, wound, and newly acquired criminal specialization with a tattoo. Eventually, Ronan grew sick of his lifestyle and decided to turn his life around and atone for his crimes by joining the police. I know, but remember, this is 2014, 5 full years before the last good year we're ever gonna live through. Anyways, Ronan's street smarts and his ability to pass off as a random goon on account of his body being smudged with Adam Levine tier tattoos made him an excellent plainclothes police detective, gaining the respect of his colleagues. Well, except one. Well, actually, nobody really trusted Ronan. In fact, it's fair to assume that the general consensus amongst his colleagues was that Ronan was tainting the profession's reputation, that he was a mere thug hiding behind a badge while going on with his usual bullshit without suffering the repercussions. Which is really funny to hear considering the current, political climate, but that's a discussion for people smarter than me. That's just backstory though. The game makes it clear that apart from his reckless and daredevilish antics that were part of his coping mechanism following his wife's death, Ronan has in fact turned his life around. We never get to see that edgier side of Ronan in action, just glimpses in the form of his wife's non-diegetic but played as diegetic recollections. Which brings us to the next major character, Ronan's dead wife Julia. See, the game goes out of its way to document Ronan's transition from the departed extra to wife guy, which is fine. I have nothing against this. Some people find peace in sharing their life with someone else, which is okay, as long as they don't force their partner to shoulder the burden of their growth. That's toxic as shit. So, you know what's missing from this equation? Julia's perspective. Or rather, Julia's perspective independent of Ronan. She's written in such a way that her entire world revolves around Ronan. I never got to know her as an individual, her insecurities, her ambitions. She doesn't have much of a personality outside her relationship with Ronan. And look, I get that Ronan is the main character and the writers had only so much bandwidth to flesh out characters in a game this short, but I still feel they could have done a better job with her. I don't know if it's a lack of experience or a case of the writers abusing Ronan's central role in the plot to the point that he became a writing crutch, but yeah, I don't know. Considering how important Julia is in the plot, I believe she deserved more narrative real estate to shine on her own. It's not all bad though. They actually did a great job with Joy, a rebellious teenage psychic who finds herself deep into the Bell Killer plot. She's competent, fiercely independent, and, you know, I like my roguish characters when they're not written to come across as insufferable. And then there's the multitude of side characters Ronan meets across the investigation. But you know what, this might be a better fit for the gameplay section, so we may as well end the writing segment here. So yeah, the writing has its good moments, but I wouldn't say it's anything spectacular.
That just makes it all the more twisted.
Sole Suspect is a narrative-driven action-adventure with some light puzzle-solving and investigation mechanics. If you've played LA Noire, you'll feel right at home in Sole Suspect. The gameplay boils down to entering a crime scene, finding X number of clues, and connecting the dots to reach a conclusion. The game then prompts you to travel to the next area of interest, and so on and so forth until the credits roll. That's the gist, but there's more to it than this. See, I was really curious how the ghost theme would mesh with the investigation mechanics. After all, Ronan is unable to physically interact with the world, so how was he supposed to, like, manipulate objects and, like, I don't know, interview witnesses, flip through case files, do any meaningful police work? Well, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the ghost theme wasn't just a gimmick. There's even a cool story moment where a fellow ghost tells Ronan that whatever skills one had when alive would get a boost in the afterlife. In a moment of inspiration, I alt-tabbed and did a bit of digging, by which I mean I looked up the game's Wikipedia page and discovered that Yosuke Shiokawa, a creative director at Square Enix, came up with the concept from watching Die Hard and asking himself, what if John McClane died? Would he give up? And reasoned that no, he wouldn't. He then pitched the idea to Airtight Games, and the game kinda evolved from that point. I gotta say, this is one of the more interesting video game origin stories I've heard, and it really made me view Sole Suspect in an entirely different light. So here's how a typical investigation plays out. Ronan enters a crime scene. The game gives you a specific number of clues to find, and you do so by poking around. They're very obviously telegraphed, so you shouldn't have any issues finding them. That's the physical clues visible to the living. Ronan, being a ghost super detective, can tap into the immaterial plane of the unliving and uncover clues that are, well, immaterial. This is just a convoluted way of saying that you press a button and the ghostly crumbs of an object take shape. Once you find all the clues, which may or may not be relevant to the investigation, you connect the pieces and reach a conclusion. Occasionally, you'll have to nudge someone's memory to uncover a vital piece of intel. To do so, you simply possess said person, choose the right clue, and that will unlock the memory necessary to advance the investigation. Here's something cool. Say you have to interact with a physical object, like a computer, to get a clue. The process is the same. You possess a person and have them do it for you. In fact, I'd say about 70% of the gameplay revolves around this possession mechanic. Let me give you two examples. Self-contained main story areas use these demonic floor portals as level design gimmicks to lead players on certain paths. Walk into one and it's game over. You condemn poor Ronan to an eternity of torture, presumably because this game's version of hell is a never-ending Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. To hump the bump over portals, at least those positioned in choke points, you need to possess patrolling NPCs and jump out at the right moment. Second example, cats. Yes, you can possess cats, crawl through vents and jump on furniture and climb walls and trees and fences, but only in specific moments when the game arbitrarily decides that Ronan can't progress on his own. Take control of human beings and joyride their brains into revealing information they'd suppressed? Piece of cake. Travel through vents or squeeze through tiny openings in the wall? Dude, like, who the fuck do you think I am, JC Denton? Come on! Anyways, don't expect stray levels of animations, but you know, I'll take any opportunity to control a cat in my video games. Oh, you can also possess random NPCs and read their minds. They seldom have anything interesting to say, mostly inane, mundane bullshit, which is kinda realistic, I guess. If Ronan were to read my mind, all he'd find would be like Nas lyrics and rants about those motherfuckers who jostle to enter the tram as soon as the doors open before anyone has a chance to get out. I hope there's a special kind of hell for people who do that. One that the Red Hot Chili Peppers rule over. Under the bridge downtown, how about under the bridge of eternal damnation? Now, in between the main missions, which take place in self-contained areas, you can pick up side quests in the semi-open world sections. I guess you can call them side investigations because it's mostly the same gameplay as in the story missions. Find X clues and discover how Y happened. But the main attraction in this case, no pun intended, are the stories. Basically, you come across these lost and confused souls who suffered violent deaths, and you have to uncover how they died in order for them to reach the afterlife. There's the dude bro who died in a car crash after a night of drunken antiques, the lady who drowned after the rowboat she was riding flipped over, the jealous woman who is convinced her boyfriend cheated on her when she was alive. Nothing to write home about, but I love an honest whodunit. If you'll allow me a small spoiler, the thing that irked me was that the side investigations, at least the ones I found, I'm sure I missed some, had a happy ending. I would have loved to see the occasional dark twist, like maybe the dude bro actually caused the car crash that led to his friend's death, or maybe the jealous ghost woman did some fucked up shit that led to a rift between her and her still living and happily engaged ex-boyfriend. What if the game let you make a moral decision? Tell someone the truth and condemn them to roam the earth for eternity as a tortured ghost, or lie and help them reach the afterlife. For a game that went to great lengths to integrate Western and Eastern philosophies regarding ghosts, the writing around some of these side quests make them seem like sappy Hallmark Christmas specials. You know what would have been cool? If the writers focused more on literally any other ghost besides the ones that you help during side quests. The frat boy that died after being locked up in a tomb during an initiation ritual but doesn't realize he has passed. The crook that died during a failed kidnapping scheme and is now haunting his target. This fucking Chad ghost that haunts the crew of a ghost hunting show. Just look at him, he's just standing right in front of the camera. That's the kind of shit I fuck with. But as it stands, they get 3 lines of dialogue at most, and then you're off to solve whatever. Such a wasted opportunity, man. By the way, you might have noticed that Sole Suspects has a dialogue system. It's quite rudimentary, so don't expect branching conversations or anything like that. However, it has one significant quirk that I have to mention. This jarring transition between the dialogue selection screen and the conversation. This blinding flash is a crime against the senses, and I wish there was a mod or something that removes it. You get used to it after a couple of hours, but man, what a weird way to go about things. I assume it's a workaround to make the transition between the dialogue selection screen, which is in-game, and the pre-rendered cutscenes look seamless, but in reality it leads to the exact opposite effect. That's because you immediately notice the discrepancy between the game world, which is rendered in real time, and the cutscenes, which are locked at 30 frames per second and are of a significantly lower graphical fidelity. I don't usually talk about collectibles, but I think they warrant at least a passing mention in this case. So, each area contains a number of artifacts. Collect them all and you unlock a ghost story. And I mean a ghost story in the most literal sense of the word. It's a slightly animated still image with a voice talking over it. Now, let me make one thing absolutely clear. I am not criticizing the devs for this approach. It would have been absurd to spend time and resources on creating cutscenes for some collectibles that players may or may not bother to look for. Plus, I kinda dig this format because 1, it's the closest thing to a spooky campfire story I've ever experienced in a video game, and 2, it leaves a lot to the imagination. The writing and the excellent voice work are enough to carry these stories. So, I highly recommend you seek these collectibles out, because the unlockable stories are quite good. Don't expect to shit and piss your pants or anything like that though. With a few exceptions, most of this game is as spooky as Scooby-Doo. All that's missing is a door chase gag. The combat system is by far Sole Suspect's weakest aspect. Well, I'm stretching the definition a bit by calling it a combat system because you don't confront enemies directly. The enemies being these ugly, snarling demons. It basically boils down to slowly approaching the demons from behind and executing them via QTE opportunities. When spotted, you simply jump into a shade like this one and hide. Demons will check all the shades in their vicinity, so it's a good idea to teleport from shade to shade until they resume their normal patrol routes. And that's pretty much it. Seems pretty inoffensive, right? It's at the midpoint of the story where this system starts showing its cracks and it becomes apparent just how underdeveloped and imbalanced it is. It's when the game shoves these semi-open spaces with imbalanced demons to hiding spots ratios down your throat and expects you to somehow manage. There are moments when the shades are so far away from the demons' patrol routes that you have no choice but to charge them and hope you're fast enough. It's even more infuriating when a demon is slightly outside the range of a distraction's AoE. And it's not like the encounters were designed with small spaces in mind. They can be just as egregious inside when consecrated walls thwart any flanking opportunities and you're forced to face demons head on. Of course, there's always the option to just make a run for it. Good luck with that. Not only are demons fast as fuck, but Ronan runs at the pace of a marketing executive jogging through a gentrified neighborhood. I guess Abigail forgot to tell Ronan that his reduced lung capacity caused by years of chain smoking will also transfer to the afterlife alongside his detective skills. The silver lining is that the combat encounters are spread evenly over the game and there's not a lot of them to deal with anyway. I think a couple of defensive abilities might have made the combat more interesting, like a telekinesis ability to move specific objects without touching them and distract demons, or make it so that when I possess a human being I can move them. It wouldn't even require in-game lore justification because a cutscene shows a ghost doing exactly that. So why can't I do it? Maybe because Ronan is a young, inexperienced ghost? Or you know what, here's a better idea. Hear me out. Forget about cluttering your game with mechanics and shit. Just make the ones you already have, like teleportation, less useless. Just look at the range of this thing. It's ridiculous. It takes an eternity to position and execute. I may as well walk there than teleport. Alright, that concludes the gameplay section. I'm about to spoil the ever-loving fuck out of this game, so if you want to go in blind, skip to here. Okay, so, as I said earlier, the gist is that Ronan has to solve his own murder to reach the afterlife. For that, he needs to uncover the identity of the Bell Killer, which proves trickier than he thought on account of him being a fucking ghost and the Bell Killer being one step ahead of him in spite of his efforts. And it's not like he can just reach out to his fellow unliving and ask for help. Abigail, the teenage Puritan ghost, and literally the first of his kind that he meets, is cheerfully cryptic, so yeah. The situation seems hopeless for Ronan, almost as if he's in purgatory. Anyways, he eventually meets Joy, the rebellious teenage psychic I mentioned earlier, who reluctantly accepts to help Ronan because she was kinda sorta indirectly responsible for his death. I mean, she was present at the scene of Ronan's murder and she slipped off at the last moment. A reasonable number of spooky missions and some back and forth later, the pair discover that the Bell Killer has been targeting psychics, or as they were known in colonial times when Salem stopped burning them at the stake, witches, which means that Joy was the target on that fateful night when Ronan met his end. I mean, of course Ronan could not have been the target since he barged in on the Bell Killer and a frightened Joy, but that still left the question of what the Bell Killer was doing there in the first place. We know why Ronan went in without backup. He was grieving his dead wife and self-medicating with a heavy dose of thick-headed machismo, but the Bell Killer's motives were not as clear. Was he looking for something? Perhaps Joy's Joy Division vinyl? Nah, he wanted to kill her because she was a psychic, and then maybe snatch the Joy Division record. But that still leaves the Bell Killer's identity up in the air. All evidence points to Baxter, a hostile colleague of Ronan whose fingerprints seem to be all over the case, as he was in contact with Joy's missing mother Cassandra and at one point concealed critical evidence. Ronan catches up with Baxter in the Bell Killer's hideout only to find Baxter's ghost near his body. Apparently he had continued investigating the Bell Killer case in secret following his demotion, and all the suspicious stuff Ronan noticed he did was a big misunderstanding. And then the game drops one hell of a bombshell. The Bell Killer was Abigail. See, Abigail was a bit of a punk-ass snitch. A series of flashbacks revealed that Abigail had been accusing innocent people of witchcraft, leading to their deaths. She believed that witches, Psychics made contracts with demons to gain demonic powers. Right as she received her sentence, she drew a bell symbol on the floor, swearing that she would know no peace until the bell tolls for all the witches in Salem. Hence the bell symbolism of this case. Abigail the Snitch got her metaphorical stitches and, well, the rest is history. That's fine and all, but that still doesn't answer the question of who exactly the bell killer is. Like, the physical bell killer. Turns out, Abigail has possessed many people throughout the 300 years or so since her death to carry out the bell killer murders before killing the possessed. And among the possessed are Baxter and Ronan's brother-in-law, Rex. In fact, it was a possessed Rex who killed Ronan. So Baxter, as we know, is dead. But why did Ronan have to die? Well...
I wasn't close to the truth in the apartment. I wasn't one of your killers. Why did I have to die?
Yep, Ronan was among the possessed, having killed a victim whose murder you investigate during the events of the game. I did not see this twist coming. Not that I ever see twists coming, but boy, did I not see this one coming. The story is reason enough to pick up this game despite its gameplay flaws. The plot twists and turns like a Mad Lib beat, and by the end your head spinning with questions and yearning for more. I don't think I have anything else to add here. I've intentionally left out some plot details just in case you intend to play Sole Suspects after this plot recap. And with that we can finally wrap this video up. Sole Suspect is rough. But not 4 or even 5 out of 10 rough, like some reviews would like you to believe. In my opinion, a total focus on anything besides the combat would have made for a significantly more enjoyable game. No combat, just this. Looking for clues, talking with ghosts and hearing their stories, and exploring Salem for tidbits of lore. Sadly, Sole Suspects is of an era when games outside the indie sphere were expected to have combat. That being said, I still think you should give this game a try. It's short, the story is intriguing, and it has a lot of cool concepts that almost compensate for its shortcomings. Too bad this was the last game that Airtight Games ever developed. Sole Suspect is definitely sequel or at least spiritual successor material. Thanks for watching. As always, special thanks to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.